Welcome to Retirementals, a podcast that dives headfirst into the issues facing the financial sector at the intersection of investment, technology and financial advice. Hosted by Abraham Okusanya, you can expect raw honesty, critical analysis and energetic interviews. Here is your host, Abraham Okusanya.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Retiremental Podcast. I'm Abraham Okusanya, and it's great to have you here on the podcast today. I want to talk about something that every advisor that I know obsess about. This is the value of advice. There is tons and tons of research out there trying to quantify the value of financial advice. But as the saying goes, the value is in the eye of the beholder. So my guest today is conducted an in-depth study or research on not the value of advice per se, but the perception of the value of advice. My guest today is Paulo Costa, PhD, who is a behavioral economist at Vanguard and the co-author of a new paper titled Quantifying the Investor's View on the Value of Human and Robo-Advice. Paulo, welcome to Retirementals.
Thank you, Abraham. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Paulo, can you give our audience a little bit of a background to your career, how you started out, and how you've come to, research this paper at Vanguard?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I am originally from Brazil. So I got a full ride scholarship to go study in the U.S. So that was now a long time ago. But so I've been in the U.S. now for a while. And, when I finished my undergrad, all that I could think of was like, I want to do research. There was no other path for me rather than doing a PhD. And ended up studying the PhD, behavioral economics. And what I find so magical about behavioral economics, and a little bit of funny as well, is that, obviously we are trying to understand, how people behave around money and about, economic matters. But what I find very interesting about behavioral economists, I can't speak on behalf of all of us, but I can say that we tend to be the most behavioral of people. So, if you look at the list of behavioral bias, all the behavioral economists are like, check, yes, I've done that mistake. Yes, I have thought about making that mistake. So it's just a very interesting role because, you really understand what the investor is thinking about. So it's just really fun to be a behavioral economist because, then by understanding how people really think about economics and finance, we can, nudge them towards, making better decisions. And, at Vanguard, we're trying to give investors the best chance for investment success, and I think behavioral economists are really well positioned to do that. And how did we come up with this paper? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to ask you. You've written this paper with Jane Henshaw. Tell us about the idea behind the paper. What is it that you're trying to eke out of that research?
Yeah, and I think you nailed the idea of the paper in the introduction because there are a lot of papers out there that are about the value of advice, right? And some of them are going to use mathematical models to try to estimate this with a lot of assumptions. But like you said, value is in the eye of the beholder, right? So this paper is different from the rest because what we do is that we actually ask the investor, what do you believe the value is? And I find that very refreshing. It's just a very different take on this because one thing is for you to say, the value of advice is X, but the other thing is what the investor thinks. I think I get this much value. And I think that's a very powerful perspective. So, and this idea of the paper really came from the perceptions that we saw like on the media at times. Every so often you read an article about like, technology will take over this industry, that industry. And, every so often you hear about that coming to the financial industry as well. And at the same time, when you talk to people with financial advisors, some people really like their financial advisors. So one thing that we wanted to see was that with the rise of the robo-advisors and the well-established human advisors, how do people feel about both of them? And that's how we started.
Incredible. So you went out and you surveyed 1,500 investors. Some of them are robo-advisor users, and some of them work with real advisors, human advisors. So talk to us about how you set out that survey and the overriding sort of takeaway from that research.
Absolutely. So, with this idea of automation taking over the industry, this that has been said. What we wanted to do was to evaluate three things. The first one is loyalty, right? Because if automation is coming and like people said that it's going to take over, well, you'd think loyalty would be something very important on this. So probably if automation is going to take over, two things should happen. The first one is people who have digital advisors should still want to have digital advisors going forward. And people who have human advisors would like to switch to digital advisors, right? So that would be the assumption. And then actually the first thing that we find there in terms of loyalty is actually quite the opposite, is that people who have human advisors, 93% of them say, we would still like to have a human advisor as part of our advice practice going forward. So that for me was a really, sobering number, because one thing is like 50%, but like 93%, it's really like most people who have a human advisor still want to have one going forward. And then the flip side of that, it's this idea of now thinking about the digital investors. What about their loyalty to their services? And then what we find is that 88% of them actually are willing to switch to a human advisor in the future. They are willing to consider switching to a human advisor. And that for us was, a strong argument to say, well, there is something about the human advisors that seems to be so far enduring. And then we go after trying to figure it out what it is.
That is brilliant. I guess a lot of our audience on the podcast are financial advisors. They're probably sitting there thinking to themselves, duh, we told you so. 93% or 93% of our clients will stick with us. They don't have robo-advice envy. But the fascinating thing for me is that you said 88% of people who are using robo-advice will consider switching to human advisor. That's really, really fascinating. And so I guess my question is, you asked these people how much value they would place on the advice. What do they think the advice is worth in percentage terms? And I guess the question is, were you surprised that there was only a 2% difference in the value perceived by people using human advice versus digital advice?
Yeah, so I mean, to your point, loyalty comes from something, right? And we at Vanguard, believe that loyalty comes in great part from the value that people get from the service that they use, and that wouldn't be different with financial advice. And at Vanguard, we like to think of value along three dimensions. So the first one being the portfolio value, that is more related to performance of a portfolio. Then we have financial value, which is the attainment of goals. And the third one is the emotional value, right? The financial peace of mind, being able to sleep at night, even when markets are volatile. So what you mentioned is initially the portfolio value. Right. And what we found there when asking investors, what would you believe your performance was in the past 3 years with your advisor? And then we ask them, what would you imagine your performance would have been without your advisor? So trying to get the counterfactual out of them. And then, that difference of those two questions would be, what they perceive the portfolio value to be of their financial advisors.
So they think that using a financial advisor has made a 5% difference to them. In other words, if they hadn't used a financial advisor, they think they would have got 5% less than they actually received. Right.
That's right. In annual returns, this is for the human financial advised
Right.
clients. For the robo-advised clients, they think that this gap, the portfolio value of a robo-advisor is 3%. And you may see this difference of 2% between the two of them, but I actually don't pay as much attention to that number for the following reason: is that those two populations are just very different, right? And their level of financial sophistication may just be very different. So what I like to think, in terms of the value add, which I think is just really cool, is just that the financial advice industry, in the eyes of the investors, whether it's human, whether it's robo, they add a ton of value. The investor believes that. So I think that's just incredibly powerful. I have a family member in the U.S. that she has no idea. She's not financially literate just because she doesn't like it. She doesn't like to think about this. But she has a financial advisor, has had it for a long time, and now she's about to retire with in a very comfortable situation, because she had that financial advisor. So
right.
It's very likely that a person like her would have been, for example, in all cash all these years,
right,
have missed, right, the financial premium, the equity premium and the bond premium. So you have missed all of this. So actually, in finance, we always think that people, we're all financial professionals, right? So we tend to think about our own experiences, but there are people out there that don't like finance. Surprise, surprise, and these people, they really get a lot of value from having that guidance. And we have seen that human and robo advisors, they add value to financial planning, to portfolio. So it's just a very good news for the financial industry as a whole. We add value to our clients.
Yeah, that's insightful actually, because even I like the way you decomposed the element of value to the investment, the goal of financial, and then the psychological or the peace of mind. But when it comes to that portfolio value, we tend to measure that against the market. We say, if you're an advisor and you're going to pick stocks, or you're going to, whatever you do, right? Now, a lot of advisors don't do that, but you construct a portfolio for the client. We tend to measure that against, or the value against the market. But really, your point, or even against what a direct consumer, a self investor would do. But actually, the point you're making is that the benchmark is what the investor, that particular investor, would have done without the help of a financial advisor. It might be that they might have sat in cash all this while. I think that's a really, really good point. The other thing that struck me is that you conducted this research at the very height of, shall I say, the great financial bubble of 2021. That's the time that you conducted this. I wonder if the perception of value would have changed. Fast forward, nearly 15 months later, and the market is in a completely different place. Well, what do you think?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because you're right. I mean, the survey went out July 2021, which was, close to the top of the bull market that recently ended. And what's what's interesting about this is, yes, we see a lot of value add, but I am incredibly curious about redoing the survey now that the market has faced a correction, because this is really the time when people are really relying on the guidance of their financial advisors. When the market is volatile, because there is this saying that like when the market is up, everybody's a genius, right? But it turns out that when the market corrects, and you really need the expert guidance, I don't know because I don't have the data, but I would still be fairly confident that people would still see a lot of value in their financial advisors, because there is a lot of research out there that people tend to sell at the bottom of the market, and that it's hard for two reasons, because it's hard for you to time when you exit and then when you go back into the market again, so it's very hard to time the market. And then, as we like to say, like, time in the market is better than market timing. So I would still believe that people would perceive a lot of value in their financial advisors.
Now, a word from our sponsor. Nikki Heaton-Jones is the Managing Director and the Chief Investment Officer at Betafolio, the high-tech, low-cost, discretionary model portfolio manager. Typical model portfolio service costs about 36 basis points. That's in addition to the funds, the platform, the advice fees. Tell us a bit about Betafolio's view and approach on fees.
Well, I don't think anyone that knows us already, Abraham, would be surprised to hear me say that in a nutshell, MPS fees are too high. If you include the fund charges and the platform fee that you already talked about, we get close to 1%, I think, on average for a lot of retail clients. And that's before they start paying for the financial plan, which is the part of the service that will ultimately add the most value for them in their advisor relationship and experience. My view on fees and Betafolio's view on fees is that they have a real impact on client outcomes that needs attention. And that's why we're building a scalable solution with technology that will allow us to keep costs low. And I think we also should consider the impact of these fees on advisors' businesses too. Advisors need to make a profit from their work. They need to have a viable business, and their cost bases have been rising because of regulation, and the more cost they have to pass through to their clients for overcomplicated services in turn puts pressure on the advisor's own fees and ultimately makes it not possible for them to run a good business. So fees are really crucial, and I'm really happy that we're in a position to be having a positive influence on the trends in the market.
Good stuff. Thank you, Nikki. So talk to us a little bit about the other components, the goal orientation or goal achievement and the peace of mind. Is there a difference in what is the perception of value there for the human advisor relative to the digital advisor?
Yeah, so again, both very good news stories for the advice industry. The first one, so the financial value, so attaining goals, what we find is that investors using a human advisor, they believe that they are $160,000 closer to their goal by the fact of they have a financial advisor. So we asked them something along the lines of, what's your goal in terms of how much money you'd like to have invested? And that's for both groups of people around $1 million. And then they say, we asked, how far are you in achieving that goal? And they say 59%. And then we ask, without your advisor, how far do you think you would have been? And they say, 43%. So that like 16% gap, so can be translated to $160,000, given that their goal is $1 million. So I just want to, we say these large numbers, right? They are $160,000 closer to their goal. But like, that's the stuff that like change people's lives, right? $160,000, is sending, your kids to college. It is sustaining like a more comfortable retirement. It is, paying down your house. It is so much, right? It is so big. I know that this is the time, when financial advisors are really burdened, because the market is so volatile, and clients are calling and they asking for help. you know Remember that you make this big difference in people's lives, and it's really beautiful and really humbling for a researcher to see these numbers and put numbers to it, just to say, there is a lot of value that financial advice adds in terms of attaining goals. um, but you also asked about the robo-advisors, and that gap, we found that the perceived financial value there is around $50,000. So people with a robo-advisor believe that they're $50,000 closer to their goal just because they have a robo-advisor. But again, I don't like comparing the two numbers. And here there is a really good insight, because they're not comparable, is because if you think about someone that has worked with a financial advisor for 30 years versus someone that has worked with a digital advisor, because digital advisors haven't been around for that long.
Right. Yeah.
So, their financial plan may not have had time to, really go into full effect. But again, this is just a little detail, but what I think is just that, investors really believe that they are closer to achieving their goals because they have financial advisors. And that for me is just, incredible.
And is there a difference in those two demographics? So is the Robo-Advice survey respondent, is that what you call them? The Robo-Advice
participants.
See, I'll pretend to to have a little bit of academic thing. I'm a failed academic, by the way. But my question was, what is the difference in the two audience? Are the Robo-Advice clients, is my assumption that they are younger, less wealthy? Is that correct? Is that something that you looked at in the research, or not?
Absolutely. But maybe first I would just make a small point about PhDs, is that, I have to be honest with you, the most that I have learned about economics and finance are from people without a PhD, right? And sometimes without any formal education. These people who, just have the eye to analyze what's around them and extract insights. I joke, my husband has a grandmother who grew up, Germany post-war, and she has no economic education. And I have seen her in dinners in front of business owners, and like lecturing them about what the Fed is doing, how they're doing this, and she just listens to the radios, but she just has the intuition, and that is just absolutely fantastic. So the amount that people can contribute without a PhD is boundless. So I wouldn't.
You're being modest, aren't you, Paula? You're being modest.
No, I just like recognizing that wisdom comes from all places, and that is, we should never forget that. But back to your question about the differences in the demographics, I really think that it's what you'd expect. So robo-advice clients, they tend to be younger, and because they're younger, they tend to have less wealth, and they're more allocated to equities naturally. And the clients with human advisors, they tend to be older. They tend to be wealthier for that reason, and they tend to be more allocated to fixed income as a consequence. So it is the demographics that you would expect, the difference between those two groups.
Cool. So, and the final point, again, the peace of mind element. Again, is there a difference in what's your finding on that aspect?
Absolutely. So emotional value for me is the coolest finding of the paper. And the reason is it's very hard for you to measure, emotional value. For example, mathematical models, that's very hard to get at that. But when you're in a survey, you can ask people about how they feel. And we basically ask the same type of question, how much peace of mind do you have working with your advisor? And how much peace of mind do you think you'd have if you didn't have an advisor? And the finding there for me is very striking because number one, human advice clients say that without an advisor, only like around 25% of them would have peace of mind. So clearly, this is a population that beforehand comes saying, without an advisor, I wouldn't have peace of mind. Then we ask with an advisor, then it's more than 80% of them say, I have peace of mind. For me, that's striking because that's what's telling me is that actually by the idea of having an advisor, peace of mind more than triples for the population, which for me is just, again, incredible because, again, this is the things that we can't really put a dollar amount on, right? It's just like, can I sleep well at night? Do I know that my investments are on track because someone is looking after them? So that's, the things that in the end of the day really matter for people. But then, if you look at the Robo-Advice clients, the picture is completely different for two reasons. One, if you ask, would you have peace of mind without an advisor? Most of them say, yes, I would have peace of mind without a Robo-Advisor. So it already shows you that the population is just very different, right? One of them said, no, I would not have peace of mind. And the Robo-Advisor said, like, yes, I would be fine. And then with the Robo-Advisor, now, around 75% of them say, yes, I would have peace of mind. So robo-advisors really don't add that much peace of mind, emotional value to their clients. But it's also because the clients just happen to be very different. They seem to be a lot more confident coming into the financial markets. So, but again, both of them add emotional value, but it just seems like human advice clients and human advisors are really benefiting from the emotional value that they get. So again, for me, it's the type of thing that a mathematical model cannot get at. And here with a survey asking people, you can get at very easily.
This is incredible, and I have to say to you, I've read this paper twice. Once when I found it, and after we'd decided that we're going to interview you. These things that you're talking about, somehow I didn't get those from the paper. So you're delivering tons and tons of value. But we need to start to wrap this up, and the question then that is left for me is that, why is it that you think that 88%, nearly 9 in 10 of these people using Robo-Advice say that they will consider switching to human advice?
Right. So I think there is one main reason that I think that explains a lot of what's in the paper, which is the issue of complexity of one's financial lives and one's goals. We later in the survey asked them what do you think that humans do better? What do you think that robots do better? And people say, what robots do better is, they think the portfolio management side of it, like diversification and the account management. But they think that humans do better is developing a connection with the clients. And they also think the delivery of financial planning and emotional value. And I think what I keep thinking about is, as one gets, older, life tends to become more complex. There may be more financial accounts, there may be kids, there may be, relatives, parents may be aging. And, I keep thinking about something I was reading recently about like how retirees, as they age, they don't want to move out of their homes, right? And why would that be? Is it because, there is a lot of emotional attachment to their homes. They created histories there. There are memories in there. And, one thing is that you input that in, you tell that to a financial advisor, they will instantly get it, right? That. But now, imagine how complex it is for, a digital service to really fully grasp and understand that. So there is an issue of complexity, and also I watched when you interview Carl Richards here, and this idea of figuring out what people's goals are, right? What do they really want, and sometimes it's very nuanced, and it's not always that you can get at it just by asking the question, what do you want? You need to unpack that. So it's very complex, and I'm not sure technology is there yet, to get at that. So that's why I think as people's lives get more complex, they're still searching for the human connection. So that would be the take, I think.
So this is interesting. So you said that for things like investing, right, investing money, diversifying my portfolio management, there is a perception that digital is better than human. That's correct?
Yeah, that's right. So what they say there for me was one of the most surprising findings of the paper, is that two things that they think, that human and digital, do fairly similar, with digital taking a little bit of a lead, is exactly diversifying investments, and what they said, make me money, achieve positive returns. And also the third
Right.
one, before I forget, is also managing tax, capital gains and taxes. They also think that digital does that better. For me, that's very surprising because, a lot of financial advisors define themselves as investment managers. And, this survey showed that actually, they, clients may be thinking that, digital, this is a type of thing that can be outsourced to a digital service. And the flip side of that is that actually it frees up time for the advisor to really focus on the things that clients believe that adds a lot of value, like emotional support, financial planning, but also adds time for the advisor to potentially go after and search for new clients too. Because, if you don't have to do the investment management and you can outsource that to technology, there is a room there, for scaling the business and becoming more efficient. So in the end of the day, what we say about the paper is that, do people want human or digital? I think the answer is they want the excellence of both in one place.
Fascinating stuff, Paulo. Thank you very much for this incredible work that you've done on the paper. Just digging into that perception of value of financial advice. As a parting word, where can we find you and read more about your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was a huge pleasure to be here too, Abraham. Thanks so much for making the time to talk about research, the thing that we both love so much. So where we can find more of my research is on a LinkedIn page, the Vanguard Investment Research. So Vanguard posts, about research there, pretty much every day, tidbits and, full papers that we do. And and I'm also on LinkedIn, Paulo Costa at Vanguard. And there is a lot of new research coming up. So yeah, stay tuned. A lot of interesting stuff.
Paulo Costa, thank you very much for your time. I'll be remiss if I don't thank my incredible team who worked very hard to put this program together. Thank you very much, guys. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Timeline App, the retirement planning software, and Batefolio, the high-tech, low-cost flat-fee model portfolio manager. And to you, our listeners, thank you for your time. I hope you've had as much fun listening to the program as we have. making it. You can find more about the show at retirementals.co.uk, and you can follow me on Twitter. My handle is Abraham on Money. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.